Abena lived in the bustling city of Kumasi, known for its lively markets and colourful streets. She was a smart and kind woman who loved to help people around her. She grew up in a local orphanage where she learned to be strong and independent. Abena has always been an intelligent child while growing up. From a young age, she realized that she had no parents or family to support her, so she decided to work hard and achieve everything on her own. At school, she made sure to excel at her studies. She discovered her talent for mathematics and worked hard at it. While others had trouble adding fractions, she easily multiplied and divided large numbers and solved complex logarithmic problems. Naturally, she got a scholarship and was granted admission into a prestigious university. At the university, Abena continued to shine. She focused all her attention on her studies and made sure to pass all her courses. Eventually, she graduated with top honors. After graduation, she got a job as an analyst in a big company in Kumasi. Life became better for Abena as she led a fulfilled life every day. One day, as Abena was at the office, she met a handsome young man named Stephen. Stephen was from a wealthy family. He was the only child of his parents who doted on him and gave him everything he needed. He started working at his family's company after graduating from university. Stephen was captivated by Abena's intelligence and kindness, so he would often stop by the company just to see her. Abena could not understand what the rich, handsome Stephen saw in her. She felt they were from two different worlds, so she always refused Stephen's advances and gifts. However, this did not stop Stephen from pursuing Abena. Instead, he became determined to win her heart. He continued stopping by the company and spending time with Abena, and soon she was moved by his sincerity and agreed to be his girlfriend. So they started dating and getting to know each other. After 2 years of dating, Stephen asked Abena to marry him. Abena was happy and agreed to his proposal. However, when Stephen broke the news to his parents, they were not happy. They were against the union of their son with the woman who had been brought up in an orphanage. They said that Abena does not match up to their social status. His mother even tried to talk her son out of getting married by saying that Abena was a gold digger. She just wanted to have a baby with him and live her whole life carelessly spending his wealth. Abena was very heartbroken and sad by Stephen's parents' rejection and thoughts about her. But Stephen consoled her and stood by her side. Stephen decided not to listen to his parents' objections and marry Abena. The wedding took place, and the young couple were happy despite everything. Abena felt like she was the luckiest woman in the world to be able to marry a man like Stephen. Stephen and Abena started their marriage filled with hope and expectation for their own children. However, after 8 years of their marriage, the couple had no children. Abena tried everything and went to different doctors, but finally the doctor's diagnosis was ruthless infertility. Abena became sad, and her mother-in-law did not make the situation any easier for her. Stephen's mother became very mean to Abena and would use condescending words on her whenever she came for a visit. This always made Abena sad, and she would always hide in her room to cry. Her husband Stephen would always console and support her during these moments. Since then, the main thing in Abena's life has been to take care of her husband. Stephen became the center of her life. One hot afternoon, as Abena was busy working at the office, she heard a knock at her door. When the visitor entered, she was pleasantly surprised to see that it was her best friend Patricia. Patricia and Abena had been friends since university. Patricia attended the same university as Abena, where they became close friends. She was always supportive of Abena and admired her determination and intelligence. The two friends chatted for a while, and Patricia told Abena that Stephen was cheating on her with a young woman. Abena was surprised and told Patricia to stop joking, but Patricia replied saying, "Abena, I know this is hard to accept, but I'm not joking and I have proof." Abena was shocked and could not believe what Patricia was saying. So Patricia took her friend to a small pastry shop facing Stephen's office in order to catch him red-handed. Abena did not think all this was necessary because she believed and trusted that Stephen would never cheat on her. After waiting for 15 minutes, Abena finally decided to leave. She had already risen out of the table when suddenly Patricia yanked her by the sleeve and pointed her eyes in the direction of the street. Stephen, Abena's husband, was walking out of the office building with a spectacular black-haired young woman in a miniskirt. She smiled at him and pecked him on the cheeks. Stephen opened the car door in front of her, and the luxurious black sedan, gleaming with a fresh polish, drove the couple away in an unknown direction. Abena was stunned by the scene in front of her and could not believe her eyes. Despite Patricia's encouraging words, Abena was heartbroken and her eyes welled up with tears. She did not want to stay there any longer, and after a reserved goodbye, she hurried off. On the way home, Abena tried to hold back her tears, but they would treacherously roll down her cheeks. She replayed in her head the recent event and thought about how easy it was to lose happiness in an instant. So many times she had heard from acquaintances about cheating, divorces, and scandals, and she never would have thought that she would find herself in such a situation too. Stephen was the closest person to her in the world and the best man who had never given her a reason to be jealous. But today, everything has changed. Abena felt so heartbroken and betrayed. She was driving home and wondering what she should do now and how to live her life. Upon entering the house, Abena became a little more cheerful and decided to cook a delicious dinner. She imagined that Stephen would come home. They would sit down at the table and calmly talk about everything. She kept convincing herself that she shouldn't have believed Patricia. She thought, maybe the black-haired young woman was not a mistress at all, but just a colleague at work. Abena's mood improved noticeably. She looked around the beautifully laid table and wondered why her husband was gone so long. She even went to the window in anticipation, but did not see anyone like him. Only a man in shabby clothes and tattered boots was sitting on a bench near the building, hunched over with his head down. It was drizzling heavily outside, and Abena, in an act of pity for the poor man, put on her jacket, took an umbrella, and ran out into the street. She approached the man and said, "You will get completely wet and freeze here. If you have nowhere else to go, let's go to my place. At least have some tea and warm yourself up a bit." The man looked at her surprised, but obeyed and followed her up to the apartment. Now Abena could see the stranger's face carefully and was dumbfounded. In front of her stood a handsome man. Abena was surprised that although he was dressed in shabby clothes, it still could not cover up his attractiveness. She tried to start a conversation with the homeless man, asking questions about how he ended up on the streets. "I don't remember anything at all," the man mumbled confusedly. The man reminded Abena of some of her childhood friends at the orphanage and how each of them went their own ways. She understood that the lives of the graduates of the orphanage were rarely successful. Many of them, unable to make social advancement and adapt to the harsh conditions of life without the support of their relatives, managed to lose the only housing they had been provided by the state, started drinking heavily, and one day found themselves on the street. Abena fed the man and made him hot tea. "So, you can't remember anything at all?" she asked. The man shook his head. "I woke up at the roadside, almost naked. Some homeless people with a kind soul found me and brought me to their shack, warmed me up, shared their clothes, but I don't remember who and where I'm from at all." Abena was about to ask more questions when suddenly she heard her husband's mocking, drunken voice above her head. "Oh, good for you, wifey. While I'm earning money, you and your lover are having fun, and can't you even find a decent lover? Though who would look at you? Only homeless people, probably." Abena had never seen Stephen like this. She was frightened to see her drunken husband swaying to and fro, waving his arms, shouting curses and insults at her, and did not know what to say. In the meantime, Stephen took out a suitcase, threw his things in it, and left angrily, slamming the front door. Abena burst into tears and lashed out at the homeless man with accusations. She considered that he was the reason her husband had abandoned her, and she pointed the man to the door. The homeless man silently left the apartment and hunched over on a bench again. When Abena calmed down a little, she became insanely ashamed of her behavior because she had invited the man herself and then rushed at the man like a fury and threw him out. She went outside again, where meanwhile it was already terribly cold. "Forgive me, please, let's go inside, it's very cold." The man did not answer. He was shivering, and Abena realized that he had a high fever. She helped him get up and walked to her apartment and put him to bed at home. When Abena checked his temperature, she was horrified and became fearful for his life. The man had a high temperature and was shaking in his sleep. She quickly took him to the hospital for treatment. Abena sat by his bedside all night, changing compresses and trying to give him medicine. In despair, she grasped the man's hand and began to pray. 4 days passed, and during that time she did not leave his side even one step at a time. At last, the man opened his eyes and looked at the woman leaning over him. Abena looked at him concerned and asked if he needed anything. "Please, what is your name?" asked the man. "I'm Abena," she replied. "Abena, thank you for everything you have done for me. I'm Kelvin Johnson, and I have finally remembered everything." Abena was surprised that he had recovered his memory. Kelvin soon told her his story. It turned out that after his girlfriend broke up with him with the excuse that he was too poor for her, he became determined to be successful. He worked hard and put everything into his work. As a result, he did become a successful businessman, but he never got married. Then one day during a business trip to a nearby city, he decided to give a ride to a young girl and boy who were stranded on the road. He thought, a couple of young people in love. But they turned out to be bandits who hit him on the head, took all his belongings, documents and car, and they left him to die at the roadside. There he was found by the homeless, half undressed and remembering nothing of his past life. But he did not want to live with them. Something must have remained in his subconscious that he could not live such a life. So Kelvin wandered around the city trying to remember something, and Abena found him in such a position. "Maybe it's destiny?" asked Kelvin, looking intently into his savior's eyes. "Maybe," replied Abena thoughtfully. Once a little stronger, Kelvin left to get his business under control, and Abena was left to wait for his return. Days passed, and Abena have not heard from her husband Stephen. She didn't realize right away that she no longer missed Stephen, and she wasn't at all curious about whom or where her husband was. She thought that perhaps there had never been any love between them if everything was so easily and quickly resolved. She was caught in such a state of mind by Stephen. "So where is your homeless man? Did he leave you?" "Abena, I said a little too much the other day. It happens, but you're good too, you know." "Well, all right, I forgive you. Let's start all over again." Abena looked at her husband with a new look, as if she was now looking at the real him. "You forgive me? What happened? Did your young mistress find some other man? Or there's no one to take care of you, do your laundry, clean, cook for you? Or maybe your mom wouldn't let you get a divorce? No, honey, it's not going to work out. Go away." Stephen rushed towards Abena in a rage, pushed her with a swing and swung at her again. Abena screamed in terror, but Stephen did not have time to land a second blow. His arm was intercepted by Kelvin, who had quietly entered the apartment at the height of the quarrel. Kelvin threw Stephen away and he hit the wall and crawled out of the apartment in shame. Kevin hugged Abena, wondering if she was all right, but she reassured him that everything was now definitely all right. Abena later divorced Stephen and moved to a new city to start a new life. At first, because of her experience with Stephen, she decided not to give her heart to anyone, but Kelvin persisted. He promised to take care of her and would not hurt her like Stephen. Abena was eventually moved by him and they had a modest wedding, inviting only people close to them. There was no need for them to display ostentatious luxury, because the most important thing was love and fidelity between people. Stephen showered Abena with all the love in the world, and 2 years later, the couple, refuting all medical diagnoses, had a healthy and strong baby boy, making them the happiest parents in the world.